Look, Bitcoin's got a real issue here. And honestly, most of the Bitcoin maximalists just aren't going to be straight with you about it. They'll dance around it all day long. But when you actually dive into this market and really study what's happening, it smacks you right in the face. Here's the deal. Bitcoin's returns are getting smaller and smaller. It's not going to pull those crazy gains we saw back in 2021 or during that wild 2017, 2018 run. Don't get me wrong, Bitcoin's still going to climb, but those massive jumps, yeah, those days are pretty much behind us. That's exactly why I keep saying Bitcoin isn't this amazing moneymaker for people just jumping in now. If you got in early, man, you hit the jackpot. But for everyone else showing up to the party now, we got to look at different plays. Now you've got mainstream outlets like USA Today telling people XRP is the smartest crypto buy if you've got $500 burning a hole in your pocket. We're talking 5.1 million followers seeing this stuff. Am I losing my mind over how bullish this is? Do I totally agree with them? Nah, not really. I think there are way better opportunities out there, especially when you're working with just $500. But here's what's really telling. The fact that we're seeing this kind of mainstream recognition, that tells us the whole market's doing a complete 180. Things are changing fast. Honestly, though, I don't even think Bitcoin belongs in this conversation anymore. Unless you're sitting on serious cash, and I'm talking about enough money to buy entire Bitcoins, Bitcoin's just not going to make you wealthy, period. But check this out. We also just got some huge news from Cointelegraph saying XRP might be setting up for a short-term bounce back. Plus, crypto companies are actually starting to come back to the US because officials are hinting at much friendlier regulations. Pretty wild stuff. Now, here's what makes this really interesting. If you know anything about Cointelegraph, they've been pretty biased over the years. They've basically trash-talked a bunch of older coins, XRP included. For years, they've been super bearish on XRP, just constantly negative. But now, you can literally watch them changing their tune in real time. Why? Because XRP's momentum is getting so strong that even the biggest skeptics can't ignore it anymore. XRP is honestly one of the most bullish legacy coins we've got right now, and it just keeps crushing it. Even when everything's bleeding, XRP shows this crazy strength that's honestly pretty impressive. But here's the thing. Most people are still glued to what the Bitcoin maximalists keep preaching. They're like a broken record. Bitcoin's staying number one forever, nothing can touch it. And look, I get it. Bitcoin's got this massive army of supporters behind it, this almost cult-like following. It's the OG crypto, so obviously tons of people believe it's going to hold that top spot forever. A lot of folks are convinced Bitcoin dominance is just going to keep climbing higher and higher, staying locked in that 60-70% range indefinitely. And honestly, even some XRP maximalists think the same way about their coin, that nothing's ever going to change. But here's where they're all missing the point. Markets don't stay the same. They never do. There's always something brewing, always new developments that completely flip the script and change how we look at everything. Here's what I'll say though, and this might ruffle some feathers. Bitcoin's going to get dethroned eventually. Bitcoin's going to lose that number one throne eventually. That's just how markets work. But honestly, that's when things get really interesting. What happens next is the million-dollar question. Think about it. So many people are holding Bitcoin just because it was first. It's got the biggest market cap. It's been king of the hill since day one, and that dominance has been pretty rock solid. But when that starts cracking, when people see the writing on the wall, I'm genuinely curious how that's going to play out. Now, here's something I posted back in November 2024. I said that eventually, projects like XRP is going to be bigger than Bitcoin. And man, the reactions I got. People were literally laughing, calling it impossible, saying I'd lost my mind. But that's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people stuck. They can't imagine a world where Bitcoin isn't sitting pretty at number one. It's like they think the crypto space is frozen in time or something. Here's a serious question that cuts right to the heart of this whole thing. When this space finally gets judged on actual utility, what does Bitcoin really bring to the table? For years, we've been hearing this store of value story over and over again. But honestly, what value does just sitting there holding something actually provide? When those crazy returns start shrinking and utility becomes what actually matters, that old school tech is going to start looking pretty outdated. That's where I think Bitcoin's headed, whether people want to hear it or not. The projects that have lightning fast, super efficient technology, and actual real-world use cases already mapped out, those are going to be the heavy hitters in this space. And even now, with all this regulatory movement happening in the US, I think that's exactly where our focus should be. We're watching this shift happen right in front of us, away from just speculation and toward actual utility, toward projects that solve real problems. That's exactly why Stellar, Hedera, Algorand, these projects keep crushing it behind the scenes with solid fundamentals. They're not just talking about partnerships, they're actually landing them. We're talking major expansions, deals with household names, signatures on contracts with massive companies. You know what's wild? We've been hearing for years that these projects won't amount to much, that we're too early, utility won't shift, there's never going to be some big utility season. People keep saying the same thing over and over. But here's what I keep wondering. When does this tech actually start getting used? Because honestly, the technology itself is what I'm most excited about, especially when you think long term. And guess what? Governments are already paying attention to it. Think about why stablecoins are suddenly everywhere. It's because moving them on these networks is ridiculously efficient for payments and settling transactions. This opens up huge opportunities for tokenizing all these markets that people around the world are already using every single day. These everyday asset classes and markets that we all rely on, they're basically begging for an upgrade. They need to be way more efficient than they are now. And the smartest way to make that happen is bringing everything on-chain. That's exactly why these utility projects are about to become such a big deal. And here's the thing about Bitcoin. It just can't handle this kind of massive scale. Neither can Ethereum, for that matter. So where does that leave us? We start looking at the next wave of projects. I'm talking about XRP, HORP, Algo, Stellar. These are the ones that'll actually become the face of crypto moving forward. But then you hear these crazy price predictions everywhere. Get this. VanEck's CEO just put out some numbers that'll blow your mind. He's saying if Bitcoin hits just half the value of physical gold, we're looking at around $537,225 per coin. Now here's where it gets interesting. If that's where Bitcoin's headed, where do you think XRP's price ends up? Because Bitcoin's basically digital gold at this point, and eventually it's going to reach that half gold valuation. Just think about that for a second.
And consumers. I don't want to leave this interview without asking you about Bitcoin and crypto, because your firm has been front and center on this issue. And during the darkest, coldest days of the crypto winter, Matt Siegel was messaging me about his belief, his faith. And, you know, that was at $15,000. Now we're at $115,000. What gave you that faith to lead on crypto?
I mean, it's just a feeling that for Bitcoin, it's digital gold, and I just say, listen, at some point it'll be half the value of physical gold, and that's about $400,000. And I think we're just maturing our way there. I think over the last month, what's been amazing is the stablecoin news. And so I call the Genius Act the third most important piece of bank regulation in U.S. history, because you now can be a tech company and compete in the payments area. Throughout U.S. history, you needed to be a bank. Now you can be a tech company. And that'll take a year. It'll take 4+ quarters. But the revolution that's going to happen on Wall Street is incredible.
And even now, with all this regulatory movement happening in the US, I think that's exactly where our focus should be. We're watching this shift happen right in front of us, away from just speculation and toward actual utility, toward projects that solve real problems. That's exactly why Stellar, Hedera, Algorand, these projects keep crushing it behind the scenes with solid fundamentals. They're not just talking about partnerships, they're actually landing them. We're talking major expansions, deals with household names, signatures on contracts with massive companies. You know what's wild? We've been hearing for years that these projects won't amount to much, that we're too early, utility won't shift, there's never going to be some big utility season. People keep saying the same thing over and over. But here's what I keep wondering. When does this tech actually start getting used? Because honestly, the technology itself is what I'm most excited about, especially when you think long term. And guess what? Governments are already paying attention to it. Think about why stablecoins are suddenly everywhere. It's because moving them on these networks is ridiculously efficient for payments and settling transactions. This opens up huge opportunities for tokenizing all these markets that people around the world are already using every single day. These everyday asset classes and markets that we all rely on, they're basically begging for an upgrade. They need to be way more efficient than they are now. And the smartest way to make that happen is bringing everything on-chain. That's exactly why these utility projects are about to become such a big deal. And here's the thing about Bitcoin. It just can't handle this kind of massive scale. Neither can Ethereum, for that matter. So where does that leave us? We start looking at the next wave of projects. I'm talking about XRP, HORP, Algo, Stellar. These are the ones that'll actually become the face of crypto moving forward. But then you hear these crazy price predictions everywhere. Get this. VanEck's CEO just put out some numbers that'll blow your mind. He's saying if Bitcoin hits just half the value of physical gold, we're looking at around $537,225 per coin. Now here's where it gets interesting. If that's where Bitcoin's headed, where do you think XRP's price ends up? Because Bitcoin's basically digital gold at this point, and eventually it's going to reach that half gold valuation. Just think about that for a second. So here's what's really going on. Every time you hear these discussions, notice who's pushing the Bitcoin narrative. It's always these massive financial institutions and asset management companies. The Bitcoin marketing machine just keeps getting louder and louder. And that's when it hit me. This is straight up a distraction tactic. They want us laser focused on Bitcoin, obsessing over it. Sure, it's the most valuable asset in crypto right now, but it's also the most painfully inefficient network we've got. Here's the problem that nobody wants to admit. The big players are intentionally steering us away from the real revolution happening right under our noses. We've actually talked about this with Franklin Templeton. They flat out told us this was happening. Jenny Johnson, their CEO, literally said Bitcoin is the biggest distraction from the actual revolution taking place. And when you look at what's really moving, it's wild. Dom Kwok dropped some numbers showing that back on July 31st, XRP was bringing in more trading revenue for Coinbase than Ethereum or even Solana. Think about that. While everyone's distracted by Bitcoin, XRP is quietly dominating the trading volume. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. CME Group just came out talking about how Ethereum, Solana, and XRP are absolutely surging. Their chief economist basically said the Genius Act is pumping up investor confidence and completely reshaping crypto. They're actually excited to offer futures on these assets. But when you dig into their full breakdown, there's some really eye-opening stuff about XRP specifically. They break down the numbers and it's pretty clear why these networks are leaving Bitcoin in the dust. Check this out. Ethereum and Solana have unlimited coin supply, while XRP had 100 billion tokens pre-mined with 38 billion still locked in escrow. They can release up to 12 billion per year. But here's the kicker. All three of these blockchains have way lower trading costs than Bitcoin. And the speed difference, it's absolutely ridiculous. Ethereum takes 1 to 5 minutes, Solana's around 5 seconds. An XRP ledger processes transactions in just 4 seconds. We're talking 400 to 500 times faster than Bitcoin, and even 30 to 40 times faster than Ethereum. CME is basically saying the high and unpredictable costs of using Bitcoin's network might be why Bitcoin prices aren't climbing like they used to. Makes you wonder if people are finally waking up to what actually works. Get this. It now takes over 100 trillion calculations just to create one new Bitcoin. That's because of this crazy energy-intensive proof-of-work system they're stuck with. And maybe it's the painfully slow validation process. We're talking only 7 transactions per second with a 10 to 60-minute wait for confirmation. But Bitcoin transactions per day haven't budged much since 2016. The whole Bitcoin network is basically maxed out. Remember Bitcoin's early days when daily transactions were exploding exponentially. Bitcoin prices were doing the same thing. But since early 2017, those daily trades have been completely flat, which probably means Bitcoin's user base just stopped growing. Of course, Bitcoin maxis will never admit this stuff. They definitely won't tell you the real truth. And here's the kicker. Scroll down and you'll see that as of mid-July, you're paying roughly $120 to miners just to get your transaction validated on the Bitcoin blockchain itself. The cost is all over the place too. Here's what's really scary. Historically, whenever transaction costs spike like this, Bitcoin bear markets usually follow. We're talking 70 to 93% price drops. The miner's revenue per transaction isn't at record highs right now, but it's still worth watching. Even for Ethereum, Solana, and XRP holders, since they're all tied to Bitcoin's movements, if Bitcoin tanks, it could drag everything down. But here's the interesting part. If Bitcoin does enter a bear market, XRP might actually outperform since it has the weakest correlation to Bitcoin in the whole crypto group. So basically, CME Group is straight up telling us that XRP is absolutely destroying the competition right now, way more efficient than Bitcoin, Ethereum, and even Solana. And get this, they're saying as crypto grows up and we get real legal frameworks in place, People are going to start moving their money away from Bitcoin and into stuff like Ethereum, Solana, and XRP that actually do something useful. This is CME Group dropping truth bombs. They're giving us the real story here. Bitcoin shouldn't even be on our radar as the main investment anymore. They're basically saying Bitcoin's about to lose its crown, and XRP has already smoked both Ethereum and Solana. XRP is built so solid that even if Bitcoin takes a nosedive, XRP might just keep cruising or even climb higher. When CME Group says that, you know it's serious. Look at the facts. They're admitting XRP has been on fire for over a year straight. It's crushed Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and basically everything else in the top 100 this cycle. They're literally telling us to focus on other altcoins instead of Bitcoin.